This is Air Talk. I'm Pat Morrison here today for Larry Mantle. Did you ever have a goldfish? Did you ever watch your goldfish? Castle, seaweed, bowlflakes, down to the bottom, up to the top again. Well, you are now officially less attentive than your goldfish by a span of 1 second. A goldfish's attention span, 9 seconds. A human, now 8 seconds. This is according to a study from Microsoft, researchers in Canada who surveyed participants using electroencephalograms, finding that since the year 2000, which is, as you may recall, when the mobile revolution got started, the average attention span has dropped from 12 seconds to 8 seconds. So we want to hear from you about this. If you can hold our attention and yours long enough to dial, there are already some comedians on the Air Talk page who've been weighing in. What? I'm sorry, I wasn't listening, says HM. Astrogoth, squirrel. If you have dogs, you understand that. And JP says, oh my gosh, I hope I can stay with it long enough to tune in on this one. Wish it were the lead story. I feel like my attention span is, wait, what? What is happening? Does it really matter? And what is enforcing this new change? And does it make any difference? Is there any salutary thing about this? Is there any benefit to a shortened attention span? All this we can talk to you at 866-893-5722 or the AirTalk page at kpcc.org. Type fast in those 8 seconds you have, 866-893-5722. Sandi Mann joins us, senior psychology lecturer at the University of Central Lancashire, who study these sorts of things. Thank you for joining us.
Hello there.
This is, I presume, a pretty new area of study about the human attention span?
Well, the whole area isn't that new, but what is new is as you found, that our attention span is shrinking. It's getting shorter and shorter. So I actually study boredom and attention and mind-wandering. So for me, it's quite exciting, really.
Now, I'm perfectly willing to bash social media for this. Am I wrong?
You are not wrong. In fact, you are probably 100% right, if not 99% right. But certainly it's to do with screen time and the fact that we flip and flick from one thing to another, and nothing needs to hold our attention for very long. We're used to what I call a whizzy bang bang culture, where everything is very fast moving, fast paced, changing all the time, and things are reaching out, grabbing our attention as we flick and flip and swipe and scroll from one thing to another.
I'm wondering if there were parallels historically that, of course, would be impossible to document, but for example, once newspapers and telegrams and electric light and all these technological changes came into effect, whether that altered our attention and our focus.
Well, not the same way, because nothing has been as fast changing as we have since the digital revolution, because what is different about what we've got now is the very nature of the fast-pacedness of it. So a newspaper, a book, all those sorts of things, you could go at your own pace, you could take your time, you weren't imposed upon by this sort of the speed of change which we've got now. We're in less control. I mean, even if you go onto the internet and you look on a page and you think, well, I'll read it at my own pace, it's not like that, because you get all these pop-ups and ads and all these things intruding on you, and then your phone's ringing and bleeping and getting all these demands on your attention. And I just don't think we had quite so many demands on our attention at the same time as we do now.
I'd like listeners to call in, because maybe you've noticed this with yourself, with members of your family, perhaps your kids, and you see a difference and it has concerned you. Call us at 866-893-5722 as we discuss this finding, a study from Microsoft, finding out that since the digital revolution about 15 years ago, that the human attention span has dropped from 12 seconds to 8 seconds, which is 1 second shorter than the attention span for a goldfish. 866-893-5722 or the AirTalk page at kpcc.org. One finding, Ms. Mann, was that the report says the ability to multitask has drastically improved. Does that mean we're more nimble in moving from context to context? It doesn't have anything to do with retention or understanding.
Well, there are some advantages, like you say. We are better at multitasking. And in fact, it used to be that being able to move very quickly and respond to things very quickly was an advantage, and it can be in some ways. So, for example, if you were in an environment where you were being preyed upon by wild animals and things like that, you had to be quickly scanning the environment all the time, checking for things, moving things and things that would be changing, and actually being able to flick and flip like that was an advantage. Nowadays, of course, we're in an environment where, especially our kids, whether they're at school and college and university, when they're expected to concentrate for a long period of time, and that is actually what gives us an advantage in life. So not being able to have those skills anymore is actually causing us problems.
Sean is calling us from Torrance on just that question. Thank you, Sean.
Hi, Pat. Yeah, my question, essentially you actually already asked it, Pat, but it's have we developed the ability to be more efficient with our time, more productive, or, is this limited time span now a hindrance to our maximizing of our potential?
Absolutely. That's quite a trade-off, Sean. Thank you. Sandi Mann?
Yeah, it's a very good question, that, because people do say, well, I'm more efficient, I get more done, I'm able to scan things without reading things deeply. And I think we have changed the way we get our information, and we have become scanners rather than sort of deep readers. And sometimes that can be good. It can be good to be able to kind of do a headline scan and get the basic information. But when we want that deep learning, we are at a disadvantage. So, for example, the sorts of things that we want to really sink in to be able to learn from and develop and become creative about, or that our kids need to learn for school, university, college, those are the things that we're disadvantaged about.
And does that then create a question about whether students in schools from a very early age, you have to say, if you're going to learn this as you're expected to, you have to drop these practices of skittering from one subject to another, put away the cell phone, as a lot of universities are requiring people to do, and just listen and focus? Or is that going to become an obstacle itself, just the structural idea of sitting there and listening?
It is becoming a problem. I'm a university lecturer, and I'm finding that that idea of the sage on a stage, somebody sitting there and imparting knowledge, and people having to sit there and listen for an hour or whatever, is old-fashioned now. Students expect to be able to flick in and out of things. They expect to be able to access that knowledge when they want, for as long as they want. They don't expect it to be imposed on them. And there are so many other things grabbing their attention. We still don't have a facility for banning phones and devices in the lecture theatre. So we're competing against so many different things compared to when I was a student, for example, when the only things that competing for my attention were perhaps my friends passing notes and all that sort of stuff. We didn't have quite as many things or demands on our time and competing for our attention. So we are being pulled in so many different ways, and it is becoming a problem. And yes, we do need to retrain our minds a bit, I think.
Our number is 866-893-5722. Do you feel that you have that 8-second attention span? Maybe you cultivate different attentions, different ways of paying attention depending on the circumstance. If you're on your phone, you may have one way. If you're sitting in a class, sitting in an office meeting, you would have another. 866-893-5722. Ms. Mann, you mentioned that there are occasions where it's greatly to our advantage to be quick and nimble, but I wonder if there's any evolutionary issue. We're looking, of course, thousands of years down the road, to a culture that changes so much that it may be fast in terms of getting away from a predator, but not so much when it means a deep understanding that could be to the advantage of the individual and to the culture.
Well, that's the problem that we've got now, and that, for our evolutionary history, these things were an advantage. And in fact, they talk about attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, which is a sort of growing phenomenon in today's society. But it's something that, in actual fact, and of course that's about not being able to pay attention for very long as well. In our evolutionary past, that may well have been a big advantage, because you were able to scan. You didn't have to concentrate on one thing. You were able to flip and change. But in today's society, those skills are no longer valued. And what's valued now is the ability to concentrate for long periods of time. But we're losing the ability to do that because of our devices and the internet. And they're actually changing the way our brains are working.
And the way they work structurally?
Apparently, I mean, there is some research. I mean, it's quite embryonic, but there is some research, not that I've done, but there is some research saying that it does show that the connections in our brain are changing and the way that they respond are changing, and we are finding it more difficult to use those resources to concentrate for longer periods of time.
Here's one listener on the AirTalk page, new 22003, says, these days I can't have just one browser open on my desktop. I have two monitors at work with multiple spreadsheets and sheets and tabs open. At home I have a video on the left side and I am browsing news or Reddit in the other. Having just one window open seems like a waste of time. That's a little alarming.
A lot of it is about time, actually, and I think this is actually quite alarming and a little bit scary because it's about maximising time. Nobody wants to waste time. Everybody's in a rush and trying to do so many things at once. And the problem with that, and one of the things that I research, is how this affects our creativity. And what I'm finding is that we're all so busy trying to maximise time that we no longer have the inclination or the time or the wherewithal to just sit and stare and smell the coffee and look at the clouds and let our minds wander and let daydreams to take over us. And yet those are the very things that can lead to creativity.
Absolutely. You can go back to the dream of the benzene ring. But let's go to Nancy, who is calling from Pasadena about attention and attention span. Nancy, thank you for calling.
Hi, I'm a homeschooling mom, and that is one thing that we spend a lot of time doing is cultivating the habit of attention. And I really do believe that it's like a muscle. From the point that my three boys were very young, we have spent a lot of time with them, teaching them how to focus and how to be present and how to pay attention. They can read long passages and they narrate back to me, and they come back with an incredible amount of detail and insight. They're able to process what they're reading and synthesize it. But I think it is a habit, and I think we are losing that. My kids play video games, and I can see when they come back from doing that, the spaciness and the all over, and I do think that is a factor. But I think for anybody to be able to pay attention, it's something that you have to cultivate.
Nancy, thank you. Nancy builds it up as a habit in her homeschooled kids. And here's a question I'll paraphrase from David in Sherman Oaks. Can meditation and taking classes in concentration and focus help to counter some of this? Because that sounds like what Nancy's doing and what David's asking about.
Yeah, definitely, and that's one of the things that I recommend for people with ADHD who do have difficulties concentrating. And it's interesting what your homeschooling mum says there, because what we're actually finding in schools, if you think about it, is that they are kind of encouraging this whizzy bang culture, as I call it, or the buying into the culture. So, for example, schools now, they'll have the interactive whiteboards, and they'll even have homework that's set on the computer, and it's all becoming very whizzy, fast-paced. And what your homeschool mum is doing is she's sort of opting out of that, and she's trying to ensure that her children have that higher concentration span. And it worries me that schools are buying into the whizzy culture and losing that skill for the kids.
It's of a concern because in 8 seconds, which is supposedly the new human attention span, you can't really create or analyze. All you can do is consume and move from consumable to consumable. Sandi Mann studies this as a senior psychology lecturer at the University of Central Lancashire. The Microsoft study just released from researchers in Canada that the human attention span since the digital revolution began has decreased by a third, from 12 seconds to 8 seconds, and all of the implications that may be for the human species in store for all of us. I'm Pat Morrison, here today for Larry Mantle. Air Talk's on the air even when we are not. Follow us on Twitter at AirTalk and interact for 9 seconds or 8 seconds during the show. Tomorrow, Larry's back with Film Week.